Numerous Wisconsin state Republican senators holding press conferences today announcing plans to override Governor Tony Evers' veto of PFAS relief funding. During his conference in Brown County this afternoon, Senator Eric Wimberger said the PFAS relief plan was supported by local governments and communities affected by the pollution of the so-called forever chemicals. In a press release, the Republican state senator says in vetoing the bill, Governor Evers also vetoed protections for landowners facing pollution problems, further studies of PFAS at the universities of Wisconsin, and prioritizing state loan funding for the extension of water services to areas impacted by PFAS contamination.
Tomorrow we will vote to overturn Governor Evers' veto that prevented the legal protections and necessary funding to truly resolve PFAS issues in Wisconsin. If money alone was the key, Governor Evers could again use part of the approximate $1.5 billion he still has in COVID funds like he did previously.
Meanwhile, just before Senator Wimberger's press conference, Governor Evers announcing his administration is suing the state legislature for what it calls obstruction in holding up $125 million in PFAS funding, nearly $50 million to improve student reading outcomes, and $15 million to respond to hospital closures in the western part of the state. The governor says the legislature's Joint Finance Committee is blocking the release of the money. Senator Wimberger is a member of that committee.